faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the globe. Hi there, this is Sally's Book Club. Today's book we're exploring is Zero Times and 10,000 Times, subtitled How to Create a Brand New Life Script. We often come across these kinds of sighs in daily life or online, and sometimes they really hit home. Like, even though I'm 30, I still feel emotionally immature, like a kid inside. Or I'm such a people pleaser that I struggle to say no to requests, feeling guilty just thinking about refusing. Then there's my life feeling stuck on repeat. Every job ends with conflicts with coworkers until I'm forced to quit. Why? Why do we feel like children? Why does refusing others instantly trigger guilt? What makes us repeat the same mistakes? And how can we break this cycle? Now, today's book tackles exactly these questions. The author, Gitta Jacob, is a German psychologist with 20 years of psychotherapy experience who's dedicated to schema therapy research. Her works on it have been translated into over 10 languages. Zero Times and 10,000 Times is her seminal work on schema therapy. The term schema refers to cognitive frameworks shaping our perceptions. We can understand schemas as structural blueprints in schema therapy. First developed by psychologist Jeffrey Young in 1993, this innovative psychotherapy builds on cognitive behavioral therapy while integrating psychodynamic and Gestalt theories, now widely adopted by mental health professionals. This book's author is both an advocate and promoter of schema therapy. Schema therapy proposes that our thoughts and reactions operate through distinct psychological patterns. These patterns function like fixed life scripts. Following different scripts leads to different emotions and experiences. It's because of these script differences that some events happen to us 0 times, while others repeat endlessly. The author breaks psychological patterns into 4 components: the inner child, inner critic, adult self, and coping styles. The inner child represents our childhood self, the immature, childlike part within us. The inner critic acts like an internal judge, evaluating our behaviors and thoughts. The adult self is that stable, mature part within us, just like an adult. The inner child, inner critic, and adult self act as our thought commanders. Depending on who's in charge, we behave differently. The author compares these behaviors to clothes. Some fit well and feel comfy, while others feel awkward. Under the adult self's leadership, our behavior is natural and appropriate, like wearing a perfectly tailored outfit. Conversely, when the inner child or inner critic takes over, we often adopt unhealthy coping strategies. It's like putting on clothes that are way too big or too small. If we want to change our behavior, we got to understand how these psychological patterns work. When our psychological patterns shift, our life script changes too. We can make bad experiences happen 0 times and good ones happen 10,000 times. So, this explanation will follow that logic, covering the book through the 4 parts of psychological patterns. First, how to recognize the inner child. Second, how to recognize the inner critic. Third, what are the common unhealthy coping styles? Fourth, how can we build a stable adult self? Let's start with the first question: how to spot the inner child. Before tackling that, we need to know how the inner child forms. The author notes that kids have basic needs growing up, like being loved and respected, able to do things solo, play independently, express needs freely, and set boundaries with others, etc. If these basic needs are met, a happy inner child stays inside. On the flip side, if these needs aren't met, we develop harmful thought and behavior patterns. This pattern often shows up as the wounded inner child or the spoiled inner child. When ruled by these inner children, our thinking and actions come off as immature. First up, the wounded inner child. If a kid's childhood lacks love and security, like losing a caregiver or not getting proper care from parents, a wounded inner child pops up inside. When our need for security and love feels threatened, the wounded inner child gets triggered. It makes us feel abandoned, rejected, distrusted, as if we're completely alone in this world. What about the spoiled inner child? The spoiled inner child often comes from a boundary deficient childhood. Either parents did everything for them, leaving no autonomy, or never set limits, denying chances to learn frustration management. Therefore, when we feel frustrated or our autonomy is threatened, the spoiled inner child gets activated. When the spoiled inner child dominates, we typically feel irritated or enraged, becoming impulsive, aggressive, and dismissive of rules. Crucially, wounded and spoiled inner children often coexist, jointly steering our emotions and actions. Consider Sarah's case. Her love and security-starved childhood means any threat in those areas triggers hurt and sadness. Once, when her friend Monica hung out with mutual friends without inviting her, Sarah felt profoundly abandoned. She then lashed out angrily. "Monica, you don't care whether I'm there or not." Another case. Liam grew up in an alcoholic household with negligent parents. In relationships, he always assumes he'll be unloved and abandoned. Though close to his cousin, he once overheard her taking a call from his mom and violently swept tableware onto the floor. Truthfully, both Sarah and Liam first activated their wounded inner child. Its dominance made them feel victimized, betrayed by trusted people. Then the spoiled inner child took charge, driving them to express needs through rage. Having covered wounded and spoiled inner children, we must revisit the happy inner child. The happy inner child exists in everyone, though its strength varies. The more love and encouragement one receives in childhood, the stronger the presence of the happy inner child becomes. The happy inner child has two main functions. First, it helps us resist real-world pressures and protects our mental health. For instance, after a heavy work week, we can build blocks or play games at home like children, gaining strength from fun to counter life's disappointments.
In other words, the happy inner child excels at finding us joy.
Second, it helps suppress harmful personality traits. The author notes that if someone has a strong, happy inner child, they're affected by wounded and spoiled inner children. The influence diminishes. While the happy inner child has many benefits, the hard truth is that as adults, we can't remain childlike forever, even happily, and must ultimately face the world with our adult self. Having covered the inner child, let's examine the second key component of psychological patterns, the inner critic. Before learning to identify it, let's understand its formation. If the inner child emerges from unmet basic needs, the inner critic originates from negative messages absorbed during childhood and adolescence, like being called too lazy to accomplish anything, or criticized as unladylike, too fragile, or too selfish. How do external negative messages become our inner critic? Consider this case. A child achieves good exam results. He excitedly tells his parents, but instead of praise, they sternly say, "Good grades are expected. Don't get proud. Aim higher next time." Hearing such comments repeatedly, the child internalizes them as absolute truth. Whenever he succeeds, that voice jumps in. "This isn't worth celebrating. You must try harder." Thus forms the inner critic. The author categorizes it into two types, the demanding inner critic and the punitive inner critic. The demanding inner critic typically operates in achievement and emotional dimensions.
First, the achievement dimension.
The high achievement demanding inner critic pushes us to prioritize performance above all else, treating other matters as secondary. If we don't constantly work toward goals or achieve good results, we'll feel guilty or frustrated.
This critic might tell us, if you don't get top performance ratings at work, you're worthless. Or,
If you gain 1 kilogram, you're an out-of-control failure. Consider Magnus, a swimmer praised for his talent since childhood. After joining the youth swim team, he competed nonstop, winning many medals. Meanwhile, his pressure grew as his coach always demanded better results. At a regional championship, he placed 8th. His coach's disappointment was crushing. Years later, Magnus still remembered that disappointed face. He eventually quit swimming for yoga and studies, yet felt overwhelming pressure in every test. He believed any non-top result meant he was a failure. Indeed, Magnus hosted a high achievement demanding inner critic. Under its watch, he bore immense pressure. Any unmet expectation made him feel worthless. Beyond achievement, the demanding inner critic also operates emotionally. The high emotional demand critic insists we prioritize others' needs above our own. Sacrificing our desires is fine, but if we don't, guilt floods in. This critic might say, "Thinking of yourself first? How selfish." A true friend wouldn't act that way. If you constantly people please and can't refuse requests, you likely host this high emotional demand critic. Let's see this critic in action through a story. Xiaomai, our protagonist, is universally liked. She agrees to every request, never refusing even when it troubles her. For instance, she'd just gotten home from overtime when a friend called, the third time venting about relationship issues. Xiao Mai wanted to interrupt, saying, "I'm exhausted today, need alone time," but couldn't even. The thought made her ashamed, terrified of being called selfish. This story shows how a high emotional demand critic dominating our mind makes expressing needs or setting boundaries difficult. Now let's examine the punitive inner critic. The punitive inner critic specializes in belittling messages, making us feel worthless and unlovable. It might say, "You're useless and don't deserve this life. If people knew the real you, they'd avoid you," and so on. This critic not only breeds self-doubt, but robs us of life's joys. Consider Andrea, raised by strict nuns, where talking back, long baths, or self-grooming meant punishment, either public shaming or denied meals. As an adult, Andrea couldn't value herself, dismissing praise as others' poor judgment. She couldn't enjoy massages, baths, or sunbathing either. To her, such pleasures were punishable offenses. The author considers the punitive inner critic most destructive. It erodes self-worth effortlessly. Whether the wounded or spoiled inner child or inner critic dominates, they breed shame, guilt, and worthlessness. To counter this, we often adopt coping strategies for relief. These strategies for managing difficult emotions are called coping styles. Now, in part 3, we'll explore these unhealthy coping methods. The first unhealthy coping method is called compliance. Compliance means prioritizing others' needs to avoid guilt. People in a compliant state act in ways they think others will like. When others are emotionally stable, these individuals feel stable too. So those who use compliance tend to be people pleasers. For example, Susanna's boyfriend has a volatile temper. To prevent his outbursts, she often does things he likes or she thinks he likes to cheer him up. Even if she dislikes or doesn't want to do something, a trick to identify compliance is imagining a refusal scenario. If you feel guilty or ashamed about refusing others, you might be using compliance, which elevates others' desires above your own needs. In this pattern, we forget our right to refuse and exhaust ourselves satisfying others. Next, let's discuss the second unhealthy coping method, avoidance. Avoidance refers to escaping harmful voices from the inner critic. Now, let's understand through a case how someone with a high achievement inner critic avoids their life. Frito was a top student in middle school, easily achieving great grades. His parents were proud, but when Frito entered university, everything changed. He was no longer the top in class, just one of many high achievers. After several poor grades, Frito avoided campus and spent much time gaming. For Frito, he always had a high achievement inner critic. In this critic system, failing to achieve good grades is terrifying. And to avoid this fear, Frito simply stopped putting in effort. In studies, avoidance takes many forms, like dodging uncomfortable topics or distracting oneself, shopping or gaming instead of handling tasks. Then there's complaining and swearing, constantly venting to shake off negative emotions. Of course, some use alcohol or drugs to numb themselves and avoid pain. It's worth noting, avoidance isn't always harmful. Avoiding life's unpleasantness is normal, like nut-allergic people avoiding nut-containing foods. But when avoidance blocks personal growth, it becomes damaging. Like our earlier example, Frito, His avoidance could ruin his education and stunt development. The final unhealthy coping method is overcompensation. Overcompensation means behaving opposite to true feelings, pretending that's your authentic self. Like feeling deeply hurt but acting tough, or helpless yet dominating. The author presents Sven, highly vulnerable yet compensating with aggression against threat and helplessness. If challenged, he'd shout interrogations. If decisions excluded him, he'd roar to intimidate, even resorting to violence in relationships. For Sven, aggressive behavior was an attempt to control situations. Beyond aggression, the author lists other overcompensation forms like narcissistic pride, craving connection but constantly boasting about achievements in social settings, or attention seeking, overperforming to draw eyes. Unlike compliance or avoidance, overcompensation is hard for users to recognize. Many feel in control while overcompensating, smarter, cooler, yet others dislike themselves in this state, feeling foreign and unauthentic. The author believes this is because overcompensation is essentially camouflage. Thus, people feel tense and cautious instead of relaxed, utterly draining their energy. So far, we've covered the 4 components of psychological patterns: inner child, inner critic, coping styles, and adult self. Having understood 3, we now face the core question: how to develop a stable adult self. As mentioned earlier, the adult self represents our mature, steady part. When it takes charge, we become rational, objectively assessing ourselves and situations while balancing personal and others' interests. For example, if told you're worthless, we won't doubt ourselves. Because we clearly know our strengths and weaknesses, we won't waver at criticism, instead defending ourselves against hostility. What you said hurt me. I see things differently. The adult self exists in everyone. We just need to strengthen it. Per the author's advice, start by curbing harmful childhood behaviors. I've distilled 3 recommendations from the author's perspective. First recommendation: comfort the wounded inner child. Start by connecting with your inner child. Give it a name for easier communication. Then visualize meeting your younger self and try conversing. This helps identify why that inner child is wounded. Next, discover your wounded inner child's needs and desires. What does it truly require? Finally, use your adult wisdom to comfort it. Hug it, offer advice, or counter hurtful statements, whatever helps. Second recommendation: set boundaries with the spoiled inner child. When the spoiled inner child emerges, we're often angry and impulsive. So focus on identifying true needs, then use your adult self to regain control. The chair dialogue technique helps clarify goals and needs. A practical psychology method: place 2 chairs with objects, one representing the spoiled inner child, the other your adult self. They engage in dialogue to clarify what we truly want.
Take Charlotte. She hates overtime work, feeling furious each time. Her spoiled inner child makes her complain and shout, "Just quit!"
But her adult self says, this job is decent, but we need action to reduce overtime. Through chair dialogue, she identified her true need, convincing her boss to cut overtime. Next, dialogue exercises can weaken anger from the spoiled inner child, helping self-control. Charlotte practiced imagined conversations with her boss, seeking inner peace methods. She discovered imagining friends nearby dramatically improved her mindset. So, before negotiating, she visualized supportive friends to stabilize emotions and control anger. And third recommendation: negotiate with your inner critic. The key is learning to counter the critic's harmful messages. Learn to see yourself through new lenses. When criticized by the inner critic, don't immediately agree. Verify the truth instead. For example, if it says, not caring for others makes you bad, recall past experiences or friends' feedback to expose its error. Helping others is good. Edit: I've done plenty of that.
But now I must prioritize self-care.
If countering the critic feels hard, collect positive daily feedback. Keep a positivity journal. Record compliments and achievements to build positive self-perception. Also, reframing self-perception is crucial. Try interpreting traits differently. Replace timid with cautious. sensitive with perceptive, etc. This reframing helps rapidly shift perspectives. In short, comforting the wounded child, setting boundaries for the spoiled one, and negotiating with the critic all curb harmful childhood behaviors while strengthening the adult self. Next, let's discuss the second aspect of strengthening the adult self, reinforcing elements that foster its development. We've distilled two recommendations here. First, connect with your happy inner child. The best way to connect is through activities activating this happy inner child. These vary. Some sing loudly to music, others sunbathe, while some enjoy park walks observing plants. Unfortunately, many aren't clear about what truly brings them joy. For those struggling to reconnect, the author shares a technique, the effective bridge. This involves recalling past experiences through imagination, reliving feelings and sensations to rediscover joy triggering situations. Well, you can try this effective bridge exercise with my guidance now. First, sit down, close your eyes. Inhale, exhale, exhale, slowly relax. Then ask yourself, when did I last feel carefree and happy? Shopping with friends? Achieving work success? A family park outing? Immerse in that moment once found. Visualize details intensely. Was sunlight present? Did breezes brush your skin? If you've recalled such joy, list those happiness-triggering activities and schedule time for them, awakening your happy inner child. Oh. Key reminder, change requires time. Allow your happy inner child space to gradually grow, so taking small, consistent steps to awaken it is highly encouraged. Second recommendation, learn to activate your adult self. Like with the happy child, first identify what triggers it, then integrate more into daily life. The author notes, learning new skills, reading, exercising, connecting with friends, or helping others can activate one's adult self. Naturally, these activating behaviors also vary individually. So, the author suggests creating an activity log to track behaviors that activate our adult self. For instance, when reading makes us feel relaxed and thoughtful, that's our adult self active, so we add it to the log. Post this list visibly in daily life to remind ourselves to engage in these activities. Again, key reminder, be realistic, don't overcommit when planning. Say we discover exercise activates our adult self well, so we plan daily 1-hour workouts. But if work demands overtime, workout time becomes limited. We can adjust plans to our reality, 15 minutes daily or weekly sessions. Ultimately, any change requires sustained practice. During this process, we might backslide into old thought and behavior patterns. This is normal. Rome wasn't built in a day, nor did we become who we are overnight. Transforming takes time, as 0 times and 10,000 times illustrates. That concludes our book interpretation. Find reading notes below the audio. Until next time.